let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to GW Institute for Korean Studies, or GWIKS. I'm Yeonho Kim, the Associate Director of GWIKS. Thank you for joining our Korea Policy Forum on linking the European and Asian theaters, strategic implications of new North Korea-Russia relations. And today's forum is co-sponsored with the East Asia National Resource Center, Institute for European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies at GW, and the Research Institute for National Security Affairs at the Korea National Defense University in South Korea. With that, let me turn it over to the directors of the co-sponsoring institutes for welcoming remarks. First, Jisoo Kim, Director of GWIKS.
Thank you. Thanks, Yeonho, for that opening remarks. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming to our event today. I think we at GWIKS, we have a Korea Policy Forum as part of our policy program. And at this Korea Policy Forum, this is a venue to discuss current Korea-related policy issues in the domestic, regional, and the global context. And I think today's topic, I don't know who came up with the title. I think maybe it's Yeonho, but I love the title, the Linking the European and Asian Theaters. And I think it's a very timely topic, as you may well all know, right? So this is, I think, the very timely topic. But I'm kind of it's unfortunate that it's taking place right now, because this is the final period for students who really want to attend, but not many of them could make it. But at the same time, it's very timely, as you know what's going on. There was this summit yesterday, and I think this was the timely topic to discuss about North Korea and Russia. And also North Korea hosted Russian delegation for talks on economic cooperation. Was it yesterday? And so I think it's very timely to talk about this. And what we at our institute, what we plan to do is really kind of expand this kind of cross-regional collaboration and discussion within, not just within the GW, but outside of GW, and also collaborate with institutes such as the Research Institute for National Security Affairs at the Korea National Defense University. So thanks to IRIS for co-sponsoring this event, and same with the Research Institute for National Security Affairs. Hope we can continue this kind of collaboration and cooperation in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jisoo. Our next speaker is Henry Hale, Director of GW Institute for European, Russian, and Eurasian Studies.
Hey, thank you all, and thank you for the invitation. We're very honored to be able to co-sponsor this event. It's certainly a very important topic at our institute. One of our central areas of focus, of course, is a connection between the Eastern Eurasian, Russian parts of the landmass, stretching from Europe to Asia, and the Western parts. And of course, we've been paying tremendous attention to what's going on now between Russia and Ukraine, with Russia's full-scale invasion taking place now almost in its second year. One of the big effects of that, of course, which I think is something that must have inspired this talk, this panel, is that these events are provoking new alignments in the geopolitical realm that are going on to have massive implications for international affairs more broadly. And certainly one of the things we've seen is Russia reaching out to make new ties and to strengthen certain relationships while sacrificing others. And so we're seeing kind of a new, maybe, polarization in the world, perhaps. Again, it's debatable where this is going long term. But I think this particular topic is a very important one that I haven't seen getting the kind of attention that it deserves. And so we're very happy to be involved in this event, and thank you so much for attending, and best wishes for a successful discussion.
Thank you, Henry. Last but not least, Young-Jun Park, Director General of the Research Institute for National Security Affairs at the Korea National Defense University.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Young-Jun Park, Professor of Korea National Defense University and Director General for Research Institute for National Security Affairs, affiliated with Korea National Defense University. First of all, thanks Director Jisoo Kim and Director Henry Hale for hosting this wonderful Korean Policy Forum. And additionally, I appreciate Associate Director Yeon-ho Kim's effort to accept my first suggestion and to organize this wonderful program today. In my view, liberal international order, which was built during the post-Cold War era, has been challenged by threefold security crisis. The first one is Russo-Ukraine war, which was erupted last year. And second one is Chinese increasing assertive behavior alongside the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait. And third one, very important one for South Korea, is North Korea's increasing nuclear capability and assertive behavior toward South Korea and to the United States. Against this backdrop, we are witnessing that North Korea is approaching Russia recently. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un had met with Russian President Putin, and North Korea is said to export its munitions to Russia, which was waging war against Ukraine. So confronting this very uncertain security crisis, South Korea has changed its security stance from so-called strategic ambiguity to strategic clarity. As you know, South Korea is strengthening its alliance relationship with the United States by holding summit meeting last April, and the two presidents issued a very important statement concerning the formation of a nuclear consultative group. And in addition, South Korea actively joined the trilateral summit meeting, which was held Camp David in last August. And three countries, South Korea, Japan, and United States, for the first time, consented to form the trilateral security framework together. In addition, President Yoon Suk-yeol has recently attended NATO summit. So he tried to connect the security framework in East Asia and the European continent together. So considering this diverse security situation, I hope in today's conference, you can conduct analysis on the incumbent security situation connecting the European continent and East Asian continent, focusing on North Korea's and Russia's connection. So based on this observation, I hope we can suggest some policy option for South Korea and to the United States together. Anyway, thank you again for your attendance and keen interest on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, let me ask the speakers to come up to the stage. This is a flat floor, but I would say stage. Thank you. Let me start our panel discussion. We are lucky to have 4 distinguished speakers today who will discuss the strategic implications of new North Korea-Russia relations. And obviously, they have very long bios. So, but in the interest of time, I'd like to ask the audience to refer to the event program for their full bios. Let me start with the issue of potential military cooperation between North Korea and Russia. And for this topic, I am joined by Young-jun Kim, the director of the Center for Northeast Asian Affairs and Center for North Korean Affairs at the Korea National Defense University. He's a member of the National Security Advisory Board for President's Office. Young-jun.
Yeah, I'd like to change some title. I already finished my job as a director at the LINSA and my boss here. But anyway, and I finished my job as a National Security Council member. But anyway, I work for the both government, Moon Jae-in and Sung-yeol, whatever. So I'd like to appreciate for one organization and thank to the Professor Kim Ji-soo and the professor, the director of the European and Russian study, also Kim Yeon-ho as well. Actually, I've been here since the last January as a visiting professor for the IKS, and time went very fast. And I'm very happy to be here with my friend Sharon and another friend, Patrick, and I had a great time. Time went very fast, and I'll be back to my original job, Korean National Defense University, around the middle of January. And this is a very important event, especially for the Korean Peninsula security, and also beyond Korean Peninsula. This is a more global security problem now. And we visit National Defense University in Washington, D.C. yesterday with the Professor and Professor Park and Professor Son, and Ukraine President Zelensky had a speech yesterday in there. So he made this event more important. So I appreciate for his visit as well.
I always rely on my crystal ball when it comes to deciding the date of this kind of seminar.
Yeah, so my short presentation on this topic is about why today Kim Jong-un have a lovely Putin in his nation, because there has been no combined exercise between the KPA of North Korea and PLA of China, also Russian army, over the 7 decades. No single combined exercise, no military liaison official in North Korea from China and Russia. As you know, they have a several reasons for this one. Why North Korea not even considering any military cooperation with China and Russia, even during the Cold War period, because North Korea Kim's regime never want this, because as you know already, Kim's regime's most political rival is pro-Chinese faction in their history, right? So in 1956, political crisis by pro-Chinese faction of North Korean people actually failed to kill Kim Il-sung. And then their Chinese volunteer forces withdraw. At the time, Eisenhower administration introduced tactical nuclear weapons in South Korea. Kim Il-sung noticed, but it is more important to expel any single PLA officer from North Korea. This is very interesting, but this is not surprising to North Korean experts. So they has never has any kind of military cooperation surprising between the North Korea, China, and Russia. Even China, Russia, we know their terrible history between the two. They are Eurasian continental rivalry, and they have a lot of the territorial issue. And surprising, North Korea never has any kind of military cooperation, only diplomatic level, only political language is survived. So this is very interesting because Kim Jong-un now changed his position and new direction, having military cooperation with Russia and China. Actually, Juche ideology is mainly again aiming at the U.S. imperialism of South Korea and Japan. But at the same time, behind the Juche ideology is about independence from influence of China, right? So having nuclear weapon is more important choice rather than having PLA in North Korean territory. That's why there is no single PLA liaison officer in North Korean military unit or even in Pyongyang embassy. So now Kim Jong-un choose new direction. We know why, because the new Cold War environment. Also at the same time, now Biden administration, U.S. global leadership want to combine old friends in European theater, also new friends in Indo-Pacific theater. They want to have keep their post-1945 international order, which I strongly support. And now NATO would like to consider opening Japan office, and a lot of NATO important official visit South Korea and Japan as well. So I been to NATO headquarters 2 weeks ago, and they have a lot of discussion about how to deter combined effort on the North Korean threat, also at the same time Taiwan contingency plan. So this is a important issue because Kim Jong-un choose new direction, not just having nuclear weapon. This is very, very dangerous because having more nuclear warhead, more longer ICBM, it does not mean so much dangerous but this is a new phenomenon. How about nightmare scenario, which I published some weeks ago? I make the argument the nightmare scenario will be maybe Russia deploy their nuclear submarine in Wonsan as a strategic showmanship, like the U.S. strategy was set in South Korea for 2 weeks or whatever. And also, China-Russian first combined exercise in 2018, we remember, both-type exercise. Many people think about this is just political show, not serious event, because they are rivalry anyway. And we know that before 2018, Russian both-type exercise main target is China. But now China forces join both-type exercise. And their military cooperation now is not just political event, but more military level sharing information and combined cyber operation, whatever. So now Russia invites North Korea to join this exercise. So now Russia and China and Indian forces have a kind of a combined exercise, and North Korea considering this one as one of the strategic choice. So this is a more fundamental new threat rather than just another 7 nuclear weapon test or another ICBM test, because they never had before over the 7 decades. So we have two options. One is a diplomatic effort, also military preparation against this one. So many people has some stereotype because many over the 7 decades, China and Russia anyway rivalry between the two. So many people considering if the U.S. try to effort having China or Russia, they'll be not having combined exercise or whatever. But now is that they have their own plan rather than American foreign policy direction. Whoever attacked the White House, Putin has their own plan, right? Eurasian Union. Xi Jinping has their own plan by 2049, number one nation in military, economic, everywhere. So they have their own initiative rather than based on who take the White House. So this is fundamentally different. Kim Jong-un also, he anyway open negotiation to the winning chance of a Trump administration. But anyway, he would like to have a China, Russia as a military partnership. So this is a fundamental change, and they never had surprisingly over the 7 decades any single military exercise between the two. So this is a we need to prepare for that. At the same time, we need to thinking about another grand strategy. I don't know Trump is coming or not, but this November, Trump choose, we everybody know, having Russia, having North Korea against the China model, right? So we need to consider about also buying diplomatic effort this one, because we just need to keep one front line, not multiple front line. Now Ukraine, Israel, China, Taiwan threat, North Korea, everywhere now messy. So we need to think about saving time and energy, and yeah, more strategic choice rather than just fighting everywhere against the unwinnable the war. So this is very important, and I just stop here, and we can have a more free discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Youngjun. The next topic is the implications of what Youngjun discussed for the war in Ukraine. Patrick Cronin, the Asia Pacific Security Chair at Hudson Institute and a scholar in residence at Carnegie Mellon University, is joining us virtually from Pittsburgh. He was Senior Director of the Asia Pacific Security Program at the Center for a New American Security, among other previous positions. Patrick?
Well, thank you so much. And if it were not for final exams here at Carnegie Mellon, I would be back in Washington and would be joining you in person. So I'm sorry I'm not there in person. The military cooperation between Russia and North Korea is easy to dismiss, but I think it's underappreciated, both for its material, but also for its psychological impact on the war in Ukraine, but also in both theaters, both Europe and in Asia. So beyond the shipment of military equipment, the Moscow-Pyongyang axis is threatening peace around the world. And unless the United States, South Korea, and like-minded allies and partners stand together, these kind of malign actions are going to deteriorate further both world order and our shared interests. Again, even 1 million military artillery shells sound like a drop in the bucket, that this is only a month's wartime use of ordnance by the Russian army. But Russia's tired military industry struggles to produce 2 million artillery shells a year. And every additional 1 million rounds is helping Russian forces stay in the fight and on the offense. The flow of covert ammunition to Putin's fighters was undoubtedly even more important last year when the Wagner Group competed with the Russian army for military equipment. Still, if you don't think that 1 million rounds matters, ask the brave Ukrainians locked in a desperate battle for their nation's survival, points that President Zelensky made eloquently yesterday at the US National Defense University. Now, beyond the physical contribution to Russia's aggression, North Korea's unbridled support for Moscow's war effort. Now, North Korea is the biggest cheerleader for Russia right now. It's lending essential political and psychological influence. The intangible benefits would be less significant, of course, if we were not so weak by allowing members of our own Congress to oppose the defense of freedom and the provision of arms that are urgently needed for Ukraine's self-defense. So this is partly a self-inflicted wound. We're amplifying North Korea's support for Russia by looking weak. That's why every container of North Korean military equipment and ammunition shipped to Russia and sent by train to the European front reinforces Putin's determination to win the war he started. He sticks around and he waits for a reversal of fortune created not by some brilliant military performance on the battlefield, but by our lack of steadfastness when confronting a persistently grave threat. Even the appearance of Russia-North Korea cooperation, and beyond that, Russia, China, North Korea combined exercises as a possibility, but also throw in Iran collusion. All of this is amplifying a revisionist global security agenda that is antithetical to our interests and our values. When a second conflict saps our political influence and allows our adversaries to exploit a situation, as we see now in the Middle East, we should remember the limits of our power and also never underestimate the power of our adversaries, even smaller ones like North Korea. We should also be vigilant regarding what Russia may provide North Korea. Although the Kim regime should be forever grateful for Moscow's decisive role in establishing the DPRK, both powers are practitioners of realpolitik. Moscow feels no great compunction to reciprocate North Korea's largesse in the form of military equipment, but both Moscow and Pyongyang long for greater influence in the world. They're both happy to play the role of spoilers and disruptors. Now, throughout the decades, Russia has supported North Korea's missile development, but impeded its grandest ambitions for a nuclear buildup. At least it's not encouraged them. The possibility that Russia now could be offering additional strategic assistance, though, has to be looked at with fresh eyes. The fact that it might have offered decisive technical guidance to help North Korea launch a military satellite into space after 2 embarrassing failures could mark the beginning of a new and more ominous chapter of strategic cooperation that could undermine security in both theaters. And the possibility that the Kim regime will use Russian support for its defenses to extract new concessions from China, that is, seeking gifts from Beijing for preserving stability, for de-escalating, if you will. This also means North Korea will be sticking around even longer to build a larger nuclear armed missile force that threatens our allies and the American homeland. So the knock-on effects of North Korea's support for Russia's war effort in Ukraine must also be seen as another negative implication. Now, as a black belt in judo, Putin appreciates the ability to turn an opponent's strength into his weakness. So it is today that Russia, North Korea, Iran, which all looked so troubled last year, are finding fresh sort of breathing room, sort of reasons for some new optimism. Well, we too have to pull together, both here at home in the United States, but also with our allies, South Korea, Japan, and others, to demonstrate the viability and desirability of democracy and a rules-based order. North Korea's military support for war in Ukraine should encourage our South Korean ally to find new ways to assert itself as a global pivotal state, consistent with the Yoon administration's forward-looking national security strategy. Likewise, the axis of revisionist power should bolster trilateral cooperation among the United States, South Korea, and Japan as they build on that framework in the spirit of Camp David and demonstrate their resolve to be pillars of peace and security, not just in the Indo-Pacific, but as members of the NATO Asia-Pacific IV partnership. The Russia-North Korea security axis, in short, should reinforce our understanding that security in Europe and Asia is indeed indivisible. I look forward to the questions to follow. Thank you.
I think we are right on time. Next, let us discuss how these new developments that Youngjun and Patrick discussed would impact the dynamics of security cooperation within the U.S., ROC, Japan trilateral framework. For that, let me turn it over to In-hyo Seol, the director of the Center for the Northeast Asian Research at the Korea National Defense University. His previous positions include an advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. In-hyo?
Thank you. Thank you for having us, especially giving me this wonderful chance to share my ideas on this important issue. I just want to start today's my presentation with my personal understanding of strategic importance of trilateral framework and assessment of current situation. First of all, I think trilateral framework we observed at this August from Camp David. It's really a symbolic important step and maybe marked as a historical achievement by United States and maybe by Biden administration, because I understand the mechanism can provide power to all multiple minilateralism, pursued by United States. So actually, countries doing their hedging strategy because they cannot be sure the strategy led by United States can finally succeed. But with this trilateral framework, the three countries can do many things, even countering Chinese big economic influence. So I think it's really critically important, turning point in this rapidly changing history. But as we all know, it is not not fully institutionalized initiatives. So at this time, it is just a union of political will of current political leaders. So and additionally, we'll have elections next year from two countries. So the uncertainty is relatively very high. So one thing I want to stress is that the current situation of trilateral framework is not just a result of coincidence or something, but it's reflecting the reality, especially thinking about South Korean potential public resistance to further cooperation with Japan. So I think the key of success of trilateral mechanism is how can we earn South Korean support? And one critically important factor is that how can we show effectiveness of trilateral mechanism to deal with and deter North Korean nuclear threat. For that purpose, maybe we can think of some military options and some joint regular exercise by three countries. I mean, not only some new area or new factors to deter North Korean nuclear threat cannot be achieved by only two countries. That is very important thing. But at the same time, we have to think about unintended possible negative result as we are talking the stronger trilateral cooperation among China, Russia, and North Korea. South Korean military actually has observed for a long time Chinese and Russian military activities here increase proportionally to first of all U.S. strategic asset deployment and increase of combined and joint exercise among three countries. So if we try to strengthen trilateral framework as one important additional deterrent to North Korean nuclear and missile threat, at the same time, we have to think about how can we reduce the possibility of potential unintended result. For that purpose, first of all, I think we need to closely observe again the real possibility and limitation of three countries cooperation. And at the same time, maybe we have to think of the sequence of strategy. I mean, how can we adopt and under certain condition, and in which sequence our gradual policy development to countering and deterring North Korean nuclear and military activities. So we have to make well articulated and well planned, short-term and long-term policy development process and roadmap for that purpose. And at the same time, maybe we have to review the past experience. For example, Cold War period, like NATO and Warsaw Treaty Organization's development process. And maybe we have to see what kind of lesson we can learn from that. And we also, from now on, what is important, the most important thing is that we need to play a strategic game, long-term strategic game. I mean, not giving justification to stronger relationships, stronger cooperation among three countries, but enforcing China to blame North Korea for its provocation, because it can be a good reason for three countries, South Korea, Japan, and United States, to their trilateral framework stronger. So in that sense, we have to look more closely, the dynamics existing in three-country relationship. For example, North Korea, as Professor Kim Young-jun already mentioned, always they try to conduct their own version hatching strategy between Russia and China, and maybe Russia, China, and United States. So maybe we can utilize that kind of dynamics, and we have to make split, among them. And as I mentioned, we always think of it's a long-term process, and we really try not to give them justification. And we have to make, split among three countries. Okay, I think I can stop here, and I will try to answer your any question you raise. Thank you.
Thank you, Inyo. Last but not least, I'd like to invite Sharon Squassoni, a research professor at GW Institute for International Science and Technology Policy, to share her view of the prospects of US, Indo-Pacific, and Europe strategies. Sharon directed the Proliferation Prevention Program at CSIS and was a senior scholar at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Sharon?
Thank you, Yeonho, and thanks to all the institutes, all the sponsors of this really interesting panel. So I've been asked to consider the changes and challenges and opportunities for U.S. global strategies in light of the deepening North Korean and Russian cooperation. And I kind of set myself to answer, I think it's 8 questions. I'll try to go through them quickly. And so here I kind of agree with Patrick Cronin, but also disagree a little bit. Does this greater North Korean and Russian cooperation change the equation for Ukraine, for the war in Ukraine? My answer is going to be not likely. I agree that Russia's objective is to drag this war out as long as possible, and whatever North Korea is providing for that is helping Russia, undoubtedly. But when you compare that to the $150 billion that the US and EU countries are giving to Ukraine, this is not just military, but it's the humanitarian and other kinds of assistance. What North Korea is doing is change, right? Where I become concerned because of my background in weapons of mass destruction is, does greater North Korean and Russian cooperation have implications for weapons of mass destruction? Now, Putin has said that he might help North Korea with some space and satellite cooperation. That's significant because it does have a spillover into WMD. I doubt, you may have seen media reports about nuclear cooperation and other things. It's very hard to tell what the nature of that cooperation is now or what it will be, but I can guarantee you that the longer this cooperation goes on, the more expansive it could become. I'm sure that North Korea would like to enhance its capabilities. Unfortunately, it's also a source of cash right? For North Korea, which is one of the most heavily sanctioned countries in the world. So that's a negative development. Whatever is happening violates many UN Security Council resolutions, which is important. Hold that thought. I think it's only a matter of time before North Korea, continues to press Russia for help in solving some of its technical issues. Are there opportunities there for the United States? Well, if the cooperation is WMD related, this could present an opportunity for us to engage China on this issue, because it is not in China's best interest to promote Russian-North Korean cooperation in weapons of mass destruction. If North Korea is simply selling its stockpiles of conventional armaments, it's not necessarily a bad thing unless it's getting cash and or technology. Technology from Russia allows it to upgrade its stocks. So hard to tell right now. Question 3. Does this greater North Korean Russian cooperation signal that we've already reached the point at which Russia flouts all international agreements? This is really what I worry about and what the previous speakers have alluded to. I look at Russia and North Korea, they've historically been very helpful in tamping down North Korean proliferation, right? Apart from, selling the missile technology, but they brought North Korea into the non-proliferation treaty. They were helpful for the most part in 6-party talks. However, when you listen to Foreign Minister Lavrov now at the UN, he's suggesting that, well, these UN Security Council resolutions were adopted in a different political time. If Russia is able to draw away significant numbers of countries, not just numbers, but it depends on who they are also, from supporting US global objectives, then that will become a problem. And I give you one recent example, not in this field, but a couple weeks ago, or was it last week? There was a declaration in Dubai on the margins of the COP28 about tripling nuclear energy, right? The US led this. Who was absent? Russia, China, some other key nuclear energy producers. So I don't know whether that's just a diplomatic failure on the part of the US or whether this sort of, particularly in nuclear energy, Russia and China are big players. So that's significant. Okay. In terms of challenges and opportunities for the US, it has always been challenging to address both Pacific and European threats at the same time, regardless of what was happening with Russian-North Korean cooperation. The US has been pivoting to Asia for more than a decade with, I would suggest, faltering results. So Russia's invasion of Crimea in 2014 redirected our attention back to Europe, among other things. And then last year's full-scale invasion has profoundly captured our attention. There are very real budgetary and logistical impacts, defense logistical impacts of this. And on top of this, US support to Israel further increases those strains. So you're looking at $75 billion to Ukraine, all told, and now there's been a request for $14 billion to Israel. So bottom line there is these are challenging times. Now, would all of this change how we prioritize China versus Russia in terms of our peer competitors? I would say probably not. Our national security strategy calls China the only country with both the intent and the capability to challenge, to reshape the international order. The National Defense Strategy calls China our most consequential strategic competitor for the coming decades. It also describes our competition with China as strategic, but calls Russia an acute threat. Then the National Defense Strategy goes on to prioritize China over Russia. So will cooperation with North Korea change that? My guess is not. Will all of this change how we prioritize the Indo-Pacific versus Europe? If you read between the lines of all these documents that came out from the Biden administration in 2022 and 2023, most of them call Europe a foundational partner, right? We need Europe to help us on these global challenges. Our Indo-Pacific strategy also says we need Europe, we need Europe's engagement. But we're going to continue long-term to build capability in the Indo-Pacific. Young was correct in, NATO is now discussing this more seriously, and we've seen Japan and South Korea, as well as Australia and New Zealand, attend NATO summits for the first time. But I would suggest that Ukraine is going to keep NATO highly preoccupied, at least for the next few years. The one area where I think it'll be interesting to watch is if this Russian-North Korean cooperation really takes off in the area of space or satellites, because I think then European allies will see that as a particular threat. So thank you. I know that was a lot to put on the table, but I welcome the discussion and comments.
Right on time. Thank you so much for your cooperation. Before we start the roundtable discussion, I'd like to remind the attendees, the virtual attendees, that we are taking questions from you and that the Q&A box is already open. So when you type in your questions, please make sure to identify your name and affiliation. Now, let me open it up for a roundtable discussion among the speakers. So this is the time for you, the speakers, make comments on other speakers' presentations, or if you have any questions, you can do so. And first of all, I think, Patrick, you must have something to say about Sharon's remarks about the North Korea-Russia relationship, its impact on the Ukraine war.
Well, certainly. I was asked to talk about the implications, and I think I did. I never made the case that this was the decisive factor in the war, only an important factor that shouldn't be overlooked, and not just for the war in Ukraine, but for the blowback in Asia. Then I think Sharon and I were in heated agreement on that point, essentially, by talking about the potential for satellite space cooperation to redound to international detriment. You don't have to make the biggest contribution in a conflict to be contributing to the erosion of international order. Ukrainians are getting killed. They didn't start this war. They're fighting desperately 2 years on to defend their sovereignty. So every life matters, and every artillery shell matters as well, in my mind. And I think it's important to remember as well that Russia is spending, according to Alexander Vindman, some 10% of its economy for its war effort. I think he estimated 40% of its 10% of its GDP and 40% of its economy are behind this war effort, he said recently in a Substack post. And I think that suggests that Russia's doing everything it can right now to stay in this fight. So it clearly needs that assistance from Ukraine and from North Korea. So a little bit can sometimes be the difference in bridging the gap between what Russia desperately needs and what they're able to produce on their own. So I wouldn't underestimate the North Korean contribution. I think there's a darker side here too, and I know this is where we talk about shifting in covert and clandestine operations. It's difficult to point to what's really happening. We don't really know what's in those containers that's going from North Korea when they went from the ships to. We can trace the ships in North Korea going to the Russian port, military port, and then across Eurasia on a train to the front. But there's plenty of scope for China to get involved in providing goods under the cover of North Korean activity. Now, I know that flies in the face of the logic that China does have an interest in abating instability on the Korean Peninsula. But as I pointed out, China also is willing to bribe essentially North Korea and bribe Russia. I mean, because they want to keep Russia in the fight in Europe. That dilutes America's focus in Asia. And also they want to keep North Korea from escalating further. And so if you want to be North Korea and play realpolitik, this is a traditional part of the playbook for North Korea. You say, look, China, we really want to be stable, but we just can't afford to because we're so threatened. If you could just provide us with more, we can help you. And so maybe China says, look, we'll provide some of that armament to Russia, and turn those factories back off of maximum capacity back to 50%. Again, I'm just speculating, but the point is that there's plenty of scope behind the scene in this revisionist alliance and axis among China, Russia, and North Korea for all the problems and all their differences to hurt and undermine our interests. So those would be some of my comebacks in terms of the strategy that we don't really know, but we can imagine could definitely hurt us, especially given the lack of transparency on what they're doing.
Do you have any comments or questions?
I just want to ask Professor Kim. Actually, we can do in back in KNDU, but not for me, but for audience. You mentioned Kim Il-sung, and you also well stressed the structure maybe in existing in inside and North Korea. So what is your estimation and assessment of possibility from now on and limitation, cooperation among three countries, especially China, North Korea, and Russia, North Korea?
Thank you for the question. Our stereotype on China-North Korea relation always bloody brotherhood from the Korean War, but that was partly true. But at the same time, we need to understand how North Korea think about Chinese power. I just finished my some research with Richard White of the Hudson Institute, sponsored by UK Defense Department recently. How North Korea think about Chinese nuclear power lies. I said double sword, not just happy. Okay, happy, thanks to the great power as a friend, but not too much. I don't want too much power from China. That's a dilemma. China needs North Korea as a bad boy against US with a very cheap price. But North Korea has a dilemma, emotionally, psychologically. Or it's a pro-Chinese faction like Jang Song-taek, Kim Jong-nam. There's a political rival against Kim's regime. So how about the question about 1990? How Kim Jong-il did for survival? We remember he invited Kim Dae-jung. He invited Albright. He invited even Prime Minister Go Ji-mi. Why? To have some money, right? And he failed because of George W. Bush administration coming. And then what? Famine. Millions of North Korean people died. Okay, we can blame Kim Jong-il having no nuclear weapons. People die. Okay, that's right. But another important question always we forgot. What China did. Million people, North Korean people died as a brotherhood. Just watching. Oh, poor. At the time, everybody worried about collapse of the Kim Jong-il regime in North Korea. We prayed. So why Kim Jong-il did not ask too much food from China, and China neglect too much support to North Korea? Even million people died with the JB and everybody black market. We know the story, but we never question why there is blank between Kim, because there is a simple answer. Kim Jong-il did not want Chinese help. That's the North Korean mindset. So as I know, we have a moral duty. We want to save North Korean people. Human rights issue are really serious. Think about it. Also, Russian dictatorship, Chinese dictatorship, Xinjiang, and we also need to save Iranian women from Iran. We can do that everywhere, but we need to more realistic. What is the priority? What is the most immediate threat? And what is the we need to, as a policymaker, policy advisor, we need to step by step. We cannot solve everything. We cannot save everyone in 10 years. So that's why I suggest more realistic approach. Who is the number one threat? Maybe China, Russia, North Korea, Iran. Maybe North Korea can sell nuclear weapons to Syria, Iran, right? Why not? And then maybe Russia deploy their Iskander missile with the tactical nuclear weapons in the DMZ. We cannot stop because they are own sovereign country. Maybe North Koreans deploy KPA soldiers 200 to Beijing to have exercise to target Seoul and Tokyo with their Beijing nuclear weapon, North Korean nuclear weapon. Why not? We cannot stop because we did our own thing, and they can choose their own destiny. That's why, as a more realistic strategy maker, we need to prioritize which is a more important threat, fundamental threat, which is not. So stopping their power over adversary, we need to stop their cooperation, and we need to increase our power by NATO and the Pacific. So one of the suggestions is maybe having North Korea against China by using small enemy against China model, right? That would be, maybe we can consider about it. I know we can save all North Korean people, but we cannot save without any negotiation with North Korea. Unfortunately, that's why one of the questions we need to understand their very complexity relation. We remember when Trump had a negotiation with Kim Jong-un, which was failed, but at the time Chinese feeling, they worry about too much close three countries, right? South, North Korea, and Trump, America. And China, what happened to them? That is maybe we can consider one of the options to save our energy and against. I think it's China's fundamental. Chinese GCP is the most important threat, and Russia also second priority. But we need to save an energy. We need to increase our power. We need to reduce their power. So as a strategy, I suggest, I know we had a moral duty, but at the same time, we need more strategic thinking, how to use our power more, saving and cost-benefit analysis with definitely moral duty. But we need to save by step. That's my answer to you.
Right. But if I can ask you one more, then can I accept to your answer?
All right.
As a,
One last question.
sort of discussion, there's
K and
fundamental limitation,
All right.
fundamental limitation to cooperation, or in this context, different from the past?
I think that their choice depends on our choice. Maybe we can increase our maximum power by combined effort with maybe we can have a NATO headquarter, one of the office in Korean Peninsula. We can have a Japanese force in India, and maybe 3,000 Japanese forces in Korean Peninsula for every summer. But it depends on they always watching us, and we need to think about how much level. So I always suggest maybe we can have a more cooperation outside of Korean Peninsula. In Kansas, in Alaska, maybe cyber operation. I always did we need to do more and more cyber TTX or whatever against our potential enemy. In where? In some other hidden place. Between NATO and AP4, definitely, under the US leadership. That's my suggestion. So maybe we can think about more Machiavelli thinking in hiding our potential cooperation and stopping their own cooperation.
Let me ask one follow-up question about the China factor. Maybe this may sound a little bit redundant, but in here you suggested that we, meaning the trilateral cooperation framework, drive a wedge between North Korea, China, and Russia. And Sharon, I think you mentioned a chance for engaging with China. So I was wondering how the two suggestions could go side by side.
The international order that the US has counted on for maybe the last 2 decades, and I'm, kind of seeing this through the lens of non-proliferation and strategic stability, that is at stake right now. And with Russia's defection on a host of different agreements and everything else, the question really is how committed is China to upholding any of that? I still think that it's not, well, I haven't seen Russia completely cross the line yet into encouraging proliferation. But at this point, nothing would surprise me. So I don't rule it out, but it hasn't happened yet. The question is, can we draw China kind of back into the fold of cooperation on some of these very significant issues? And, I don't think that increased North Korean WMD capabilities helps China. It just doesn't. And so, but, our relationship with the US relationship with China isn't that terrific right now. So, you know, that would be, you know, we can't, we've had a little bit of success in sort of uttering the word strategic stability towards each other. Arms control is out of the picture, but at least non-proliferation, that, that could be maybe a common interest. I don't know how you get there. And how you know, you might need something to, some negative development that would trigger that cooperation. I would, and, you know, most of my work has been aimed at sort of hoping that stuff doesn't happen and providing measures so that it doesn't happen. We'll be in a bad situation if Russia actually moves forward and aids North Korea there.
Okay. I think combination or mixture policy or approach is critically important because it is one very effective way we can make that kind of split or wedge, you know, their relationship. For example, for wedging China and North Korea, I think I can give you one example. If, for example, by trilateral framework, we can set red line. For China, it is proper, but for North Korea, not proper. That is a kind of red line. And if the North Korea cross that red line, we can do countermeasure, seemingly mainly for North Korea, but potentially against China. So if we, you know, conducting that kind of response mechanism, maybe for a longer time, and China find out what result it can have. So as I mentioned, China may blame North Korea to for provocation to give you know, justification to us to strengthen our relationship. So that is one way. For example, it's an enforcing way, and another, for example, the non-proliferation mechanism. I think that even so-called in this new Cold War era, I think that one area, non-proliferation, is one area where even United States, China, and Russia can cooperate. There is a time. There will be a time. Not yet. Yet presently, it is almost impossible for us. For three countries can do something together, but at some point in the future, I think there will be we can see some moment they will cooperate because, you know, the chain reaction from non-proliferation, you know, it is so dangerous thing for all of them. So at some point they will cooperate. So we need to be prepared for that kind of situation, and I think it's better for us to keep that option. I mean, some engagement option, not just this one, but as I said earlier, that kind of combination or mixture of policy option is important for us.
I have a short question. Today is not about Trump, but this Trump second administration is so much important to the dystopia as well. So I want to ask Patrick and Sharon, if Trump back, and we know what is his policy, maybe he would like to have a Russia for peace negotiation, whatever Ukraine people upset, but also having North Korea for peace negotiation, whatever rock government upset. So well, if we cannot advise Trump, but he doesn't listen, we know. So if he push his agenda for the first and second year for his legacy, whatever, what is the pros and cons? Everything cons, or what with any benefit for American national interest? And I just want to hear from your opinion, Sharon and Patrick. I'm sorry, I know you don't like Trump, but yeah, why do you like Trump personally? And foreign policy community and not supporting Trump as a foreign policy maker. But anyway, we cannot stop anyway. So I just want to hear.
I was going to ask this issue of domestic politics, how it would, play into this whole new picture about, the North Korea, Russia relations. And I think, to be fair, our Korean speakers should answer to the questions reflecting to your question, how domestic politics in Korea would impact the new dynamics in Northeast Asia. So Sharon, did you want to go first?
It's not even 2024. It's not even election year yet. I have my personal views, which I don't really want to share here. Let's talk about a conservative, a next administration. That is not a Biden administration. That's a Republican administration. Because I think that Trump's relationships with both North Korea and Russia were very unique. That's the best way I can describe it. I will say one thing. Ironically or perversely, I do think that the Trump administration's or Trump's approaches to North Korea actually moved the ball forward in terms of, we got a comprehensive military agreement. There were some definite positive movements especially in areas where we had been unable to make any progress for many, many years. So I wouldn't rule out that something positive could come out of it, but it's very, very unpredictable. And I don't even know if you could say that there would be an effort to sever those North Korean and Russian relations. It's just impossible. But maybe Patrick will do a better job.
I'm not sure I'll do a better job than that. Other than to offer some basic principles here, that domestic politics are always a factor in not just in the US, but in Korea, in China, Russia, North Korea even, that should never be overlooked. And clearly right now, there are some tremendously strong forces underway in the American body politic that we have to grapple with, whether we feel comfortable or not. And I think Sharon and I both are uncomfortable, frankly, with some of the forces that are being unleashed right now in America. Edward Luce, writing in the Financial Times this week, talked about the Republicans being driven by both isolationists and populists, what he called even the Putinista wing of the Republican Party. That idea is anathema to me when I think about the Reagan era, for instance, or more classical post-war conservative governments in the United States. So clearly, we're not just talking about a long-standing conservative conviction in the post-war period, but rather something that is more isolationist, is more driven by single personalities, and therefore subject to whim. And I think that's what really frightens our allies and partners. The best thing we have going for us, though, is our allies and partners. We saw this with Japan under Prime Minister Abe and how well he managed the Trump administration and the problems, of course, that the Moon administration had with the United States was partly ideological, but also a failure of imagination on how to manipulate an American president who was driven by his own ego. I think President Yoon would do much better, but he is, of course, constrained by his own domestic politics, both the upcoming National Assembly elections, which could curb his authority in sort of legislation, but also, what comes after the next Korean national election for president in a few years. So we are going to be dependent on our allies to stick with us, even if we look highly unreliable, is how I can say. And I hope that's the case, because it may be that the light at the end of that tunnel is that we get into the next generation of American leadership. And that younger generation is actually a reason for hope. And I certainly see it here at Carnegie Mellon University when I look at young Americans, and their understanding of the world is much more sophisticated than some of my peers. And I do have hope for this future, but it may be a rocky short term ahead.
To be fair, let me turn the tables on you, Inyo and Youngjun.
All right. I do not support for any party in Korea, and we have an election anyway in this April, and many people guess maybe opposition party won the election easily, but how many percent of the National Assembly matter? Maybe 70%. Some people say 50% or 60 or 80% even, and if opposition party win landslide. Many people say President Yoon will be almost died, lame duck start, and then almost others 2.5 years will be very difficult. But I think the foreign policy is not very intervened by domestic politics. He will continue his policy. More important factor is Trump coming and start his negotiation with Kim Jong Un without President Yoon. So I think as a Prime Minister Kishida is interesting. If he survive at the time, he interesting also peace negotiation. But at the time, if Trump start without rock government, it'll be very situation without the South Korean voice on that matter. So general election very important, and definitely close the lame duck situation. But foreign policy will be continue. I think it's especially on North Korea, one of the Yoon Song Yeol's voter for the next presidential election. Also, their perception on North Korea will be not changed. So they'll keep voter, and they anyway have to think about on North Korea policy, also ROK-US alliance and the other cooperation with the Japan and NATO countries. So I don't think the foreign policy will be very different, whatever whoever win or not.
I agree with him. Yes, really, I agree with him because as we know, President Yoon is not that popular in Korean public these days, but his foreign policy has achieved something. And as we all know, North Korean nuclear threat is very high. So I think South Korean public, they will wait and see how far President Yoon can go. That's what I understand.
We have about 5 more minutes, so unless you have any more comments, I'd like to ask this question to all the speakers. So after I listened to your presentations, to be honest with you, in my mind, this big question just popped up. Are we prepared? Are we prepared for potential disruptions for the existing international orders or principles, or disruptive changes in the security equation on the Korean Peninsula, at least, because of this new dynamics of North Korea-Russia relations. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I got some little bit worrisome impressions from your presentation. So if that is the case, what would be the most urgent policy measure we should take at this moment? So I'd like to ask that question for each of you. Youngjun, did you want to go first?
Yeah. The most important urgent policy suggestion, right? And I really interesting the Sharon's recent research about the nuclearization process, and I always have worked with my government on how we start our the talks with North Korea. Even they have a terrible human rights problem, but at the same time we need to manage tension and any kinds of war, nuclear war on the Korean Peninsula. And now this January, Taiwan, as everybody know, will be something. It's coming as a crisis situation in Northeast Asia. So we need to manage some tension and threat in this region. So we just don't need to strengthen our power, but at the same time, we need to manage some peace and security situation by diplomatic effort and by having some talks, not just blaming each other, but we need to start something. So I don't know. I just been to the Hiroshima roundtable every year, and this year Hiroshima governor invited me and Scott Sagan and John Eikenberry on the nuclear disarmament roundtable, and he said to me very interesting. Prime Minister Kishida is strongly support this Hiroshima roundtable every year bombing day in Hiroshima. And he said Prime Minister Kishida is very, very interesting being a peacemaker by start talking with North Korea. And North Korea answered to Japanese question is very positively, surprisingly, whatever. But anyway, we remember Koizumi, Prime Minister, visit North Korea. So maybe we can start something in reducing Korean Peninsula tension, and we need to focus other matter together, not just having all troublemaker at the same time. We have already busy Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, North Korea, Iran. Everything is messy now, so we need to manage some security situation by diplomatic help.
Okay, let's go back and forth between our Korean and American speakers, to be fair. So Patrick, would you be the next person to suggest the most urgent policy measures we should take?
Sure. And I wish there were only one urgent policy measures, but let me just put among the top my concern about the digital framework that we're all reliant upon. So you can look at this different ways. Think about the reporting about Volt Typhoon, the supposed PLA hacking that's seeking to be prepared to disrupt and destroy critical infrastructure. You could that's not unique to China. It's part of the fragility of the digital infrastructure that we rely upon. And North Korea has proven extremely adept at cyber, well beyond what we thought, and they were very busy during the COVID era improving those capabilities. Russia likewise has a lot of these capabilities. So when I think about the positive agenda, such as the recent cooperation between Seoul and Washington for critical and emerging technologies, I see there's the huge opportunity to move ahead in these key areas, including understanding artificial intelligence, especially generative AI, based on these large language models that are not being fully understood in the United States, both because it's complex, but also because our institutions that spend lots of money, like the Defense Department, rather narrowly focus on AI as an enabler of autonomy and autonomous military systems. That's an important area for the strategic competition with China, but it sort of neglects the so-called peacetime environment of statecraft and foreign policy that we're really operating in the gray zone area. That's where I want to see the cooperation between Seoul and Washington and also Tokyo and other allies thicken, so that we have resilience and we're less surprised by the disruptive forces that are coming even short of major war, because the implications could be that it could lead and trigger to significant escalation as well. So I worry about that digital infrastructure, the connectivity, if you will, more than the weapon systems, although frankly, they're all important. So that's what I'd put on the top of the agenda.
Good question, but hard question to answer. And I think it is maybe not a job for policymakers, but for researchers, scholars, and students, because there is no one who do not agree with me. Now we are living in great transformation. Maybe the future history will be written in totally different grammar. So we need adaptation. For adaptation, we need communication and coordination. But for that kind of things, policymakers, I think they are very embarrassed, and it's really difficult to see in the future. So we need to do many more jobs for them to make a right decision.
I'm going to echo some of Young Jun's comments, because I do, if you're worried about North Korean-Russian cooperation, you should really be worried about the fact that we don't have any direct communication with North Korea. And of course, it is easier said than done. So how do you how do you create diplomatic engagement without giving up a lot of your policy objectives, right? So the big one is the US stands by denuclearization, right? You can't make these talks simply about nuclear weapons, but there's a whole host of other things that you can look at in the case of, or in the area of, for example, crisis stability. Because we don't want North Korea using nuclear weapons. We don't want them stumbling from a conventional conflict into a nuclear conflict. So to do that is also difficult, but maybe you back up and you find non-controversial areas where you can start cooperation. And what I look at climate mitigation as a potential area, right? We have this energy from COP28. The world moving forward is going to have to mitigate or adapt to climate change. And I'm guessing that North Korea is pretty far behind in these areas, and they don't have a lot of collaboration and cooperation. So I would say start small, start from an oblique angle, and do that cooperation at a low level so that it doesn't get derailed all the time by changes in administrations. And it may be, maybe you start at track 2, maybe it's some kind of monitoring in fishing, or you just collect data. I mean, I understand the obstacles here. The North Koreans are going to be very wary of any kind of data collection. But I think that, even in the case of, I look back on US history, in the case after India tested its nuclear weapon in 1998, we actually had talks with them on nuclear safety through our Nuclear Regulatory Commission, because it wasn't prohibited by, the sanctions that we had leveled on them. So, I think there are many things that could be undertaken. They might not have an immediate impact, but you have to start somewhere.
Let me open it up for Q&A. If you have any questions, okay, please identify yourself by telling us your name and affiliation. The gentleman in the back.
Question. My name is Don Kirk. I spent some time in Korea and Japan. One issue, one name, one word that has not come up here, as far as I can tell, is Israel or Hamas or the U.S. commitment to Israel. And what are North Korea and Japan, of course, and China and Russia thinking about this, and how are they taking advantage of this? It's interesting to me, just in itself, that nobody said one word about this. Maybe I came in a little late. Maybe something was said before I came in, but certainly not since then.
A short answer. Yeah, definitely North Korea support Hamas, and China, Russia already did their thing. So it's a more all connected, related question, not just one single study on Taiwan or North Korea and Israel. Now they're getting more. That's why we call the rise of new Cold War system, and they are more side in one sideline, our sideline. So that is a problem, and it's more possibility any kind of conflict in anywhere. And North Korea, my understanding, they officially support Hamas and Palestine, and which is not surprised. They always did, and they had a lot of record history about their Syria. Syria is different, but anyway, Syria, Iran, their weapon cell system. So we worry about another. When you back to the Obama administration, nuclear security, the concern about the non-proliferation. North Korea may want to get money from buy weapon cells, WMD, nuclear, biological, and chemical systems. So we worry about that. But anyway, North Korea definitely watching this kind of conflict as by name, and he want to increase his status by engaging international problem. How about shaking hand with Putin? Good for Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong very happy. Now is another level, a similar level about Putin. And then Kim Jong-un want to enjoy his the stage spotlight in international media. He always every day checking CNN, New York Times, Washington Post. I don't know Fox News, but that he enjoy international the spotlight. So definitely he want to engaging not just for business, but for increasing his status in the world stage. So he definitely support the Hamas. And
Hi, my name is Anna Ostreich, and I'm a freshman here at the Elliott School. And I wanted to ask specifically about nonproliferation and how does the deepening of these ties between North Korea and Russia impact American strategy in regards to North Korea and nuclear weapons?
I'm not sure that deepening, first of all, there are a lot of bad scenarios out there. I think Patrick painted some of them for you, but we don't know exactly the scope or specifics of the Russian-North Korean cooperation. I think our strategy on, which is sanctions. I mean, we have a strategy to deter North Korea, but then specifically on containing its proliferation, I will frankly say has relied on cooperation by many, many countries. And so to the extent that Russia is helping potentially North Korea, that damages that. But again, we don't know, we don't have a lot of information, so we'll just have to keep watching this space.
We have one question from the virtual audience. Maya Kinia Lux, a master's student at King's College London. You can see how far-reaching our program is. And the question is, how do you think initiatives such as AUKUS or the U.S. sending nuclear submarines to South Korea will impact North Korea-Russian relations, considering the DPRK's condemnation of U.S. nuclear submarines near the Korean Peninsula?
Difficult but very important question. I totally agree. The reason why I stress the sequence is important. There will be unintended and maybe unavoidable chain reaction. So many people think about 3-country cooperation system, northern and southern. So maybe it will be unavoidable. But I think first of all, we need to make efforts to not happen that kind of thing. And second, maybe we can articulate our policies and sequence of policies to mitigate and at least not giving them justification for furthering their cooperation. And maybe they try to leverage in some negotiation or relationship among great powers. And we have to closely observe that kind of relationship and chain reaction. And so as my last mentioned in my presentation, it will be the most important strategic game. So we need to play that game very wisely. That's one thing I can say now.
Thank you. I have one more question from the virtual audience. George T. What can U.S. and South Korea do to prevent Russia helping missile programs in North Korea?
Well, right now we're responding to their cooperation, so I'm not sure we're going to help. I think this is an action-reaction chain that we are indeed embarked on. And we have to make trade-offs, and the trade-off we're making right now is to reassure our ally, South Korea, and our ally, Japan, that we're going to work closely with them to make sure they're secure against any growing North Korean threat. But if the Russians do provide more technical assistance, reentry vehicle sort of advice on ICBMs or other ways of improving the strategic arms of North Korea, we should remain open to cooperation with China to try to push back. And we should be, seeking that opening. Yes, it's complicated because China is also not interested in seeing our strategic assets deployed to South Korea. They're not interested in strengthening AUKUS or U.S. alliances generally. Nonetheless, as Sharon pointed out, they do have an interest in stability. And so if Russia crosses that red line potentially, that's the time to be making new friends, if you will, and balancing, at least on that specific issue, pushing back and making Russia think twice about too much cooperation. Historically, Russia has been wary about really building up the nuclear armament of North Korea. And they're happy right now to have North Korea have rent seeking, have construction workers go off and get paid, ship an armored Mercedes so that Kim Jong-un can look like he's a real world leader. You know, all of those things are fine for busting sanctions, but if you're busting sanctions to help provide strategic armament for North Korea, that's a red line. So we have to be watching this vigilantly and acting concertedly with allies, but also more cooperation with China on that specific issue if and when we see them.
We almost ran out of time, but I do see we still have some people who have questions. So let me take two more questions and bundle it. So, gentleman here.
Thank you. I'm Jerry G. I'm a student at Elliott, also with the GWIKS. My question is about the US-ROK Japan trilateral strategic partnership. And maybe this is specifically for Professor So, but to any panelists, do you think this partnership would be sustainable? How long will it last? Because we already discussed about the domestic politics of US and South Korea. If a conservative US president who doesn't want much US presence overseas gets elected, if a progressive South Korean president gets elected, or in the worst case, both that gets elected, will really damage this partnership. Another concern is we must not forget there's still strong anti-Japanese sentiment in South Korea today. I mean, not to mention President Moon Jae-in, even the two conservative South Korean president in the past, President Lee Myung-bak and President Park Geun-hye, they both tried to normalize and improve relations with Japan at the early stage, but ultimately turned against it due to political pressures when they were getting reelected. So this made me wonder, although we see President Yoon making some progress in improving relationship with Japan, would it really last? So I want to hear your comments on that.
Okay, one more question from this side.
I'm Peter Humphrey, an intelligence analyst and a former diplomat. We have some intelligence now that Russia may be feeling a bit of buyer's remorse on these artillery shells because a bunch of cannon have blown themselves to bits, including the guys who maintain the cannon. So that's an interesting factor. The only reason that this artillery is useful is because it's Soviet standard stuff. This is stuff that was designed in the 70s and 80s. As best we can tell, the first batch out of North Korea went by sea. We watched the boat being loaded. And then it went by sea to Novorossiysk, right near the Ukrainian border. And then subsequently, shipments have gone by the Baikonur-Amur Railroad across Siberia. And in response to that, brilliant Ukrainian special forces blew up a bridge and a tunnel last month. What I want to know is, how did we let that ship pass from North Korea all the way around past 8 allies to get to Novorossiysk? Recalling that 3 years ago, we asked Malaysia to detain an arms ship that was headed to Syria. So we've set that precedent already. So what in God's name went wrong here with this first arms shipment?
Okay. To the first question, actually, we have a real expert on Japan-South Korean relationship, Director General Professor Park. So please let him have him. Yeah.
Yeah, as you mentioned, there has been fluctuation in South Korea on the relationship with Japan. But considering the severe security situations on the Korean Peninsula, in my view, South Korean political leaders and public people should overcome the national sentiment concerning Japan. If South Korea, the general people in South Korea continuously have a national sentiment against Japan, the security situation will be more severe. So I think for the time being, as far as North Korean military threat is existent, we must overcome the national sentiment against Japan, in my view.
The second question, anybody want? Yeah, Sharon.
Sure. What a great question. So I don't know the exact path, and so I couldn't say which countries might have had ships in the area, but we have a history of interdicting ships that may have contraband material on it. But I would ask you too, I guess I would throw the question back a little bit. One, we might have had a strategic objective, right? Which is, let's wait and see from an intelligence perspective, what's on there. And I mean, we've learned now, according to you, some interesting pieces of information, which is the artillery shells aren't that great. The other is political. Was this a Russian ship that, what was it? How was it flagged?
No, I think it was North Korean ship.
It was a North Korean ship. Yeah, I mean, when you're considering, if you were sitting in the decision seat about interdicting the ship, what are the benefits and the risks? You know, you are potentially picking a bigger fight with Russia. So that had to have entered into the equation. But
I would have had a SEAL team. I would have had a SEAL team accidentally drill a hole in the hull and watch the
Let it
ship
sink.
sink, but that's just me.
that's a great idea. But apparently these shells aren't much use. But it goes back to one point that I wanted to make in response to something I think Patrick said earlier. You know, there are a lot of things that have surprised us about this war in Ukraine, right? One is, you know, you can count military equipment, but you don't know how it's actually going to be used, right? One of the strengths of Ukraine is training, right? And some of that training the United States provided. So when you're looking at what makes a difference in the war effort, it's very, very hard to know, you know, what will be decisive. And there, of course, you know, I do agree with Patrick that it's very hard to predict. But simply looking at the numbers and looking at, you know, specific pieces of equipment, you know, this is a very dynamic situation, and the fog of war, you know, comes down, et cetera. But thank you, I'd like to say, as having the last word. Fascinating conversation, and thanks to everyone
Thank you, Sharon.
as possible.
I'd like to thank all the distinguished speakers for joining us today. And also, I'd like to thank our GWIKS team, Sean and James, and our student assistants for putting this together. And of course, thank you all for joining us. With that, let me conclude today's event. Thank you.